It is 100% true. When we hit that menopause, perimenopause transition, whenever it occurs in our life, it is a big change. The word going through the change has taken on some kind of almost, it's such a negative meaning. Some people get very triggered by going through the change. It feels dated. It feels almost dismissive of what we're going through. And I think I'm probably a bit controversial because for me, I think it sums up what's happening really, really well. It is the change. It's the biggest change that I've gone through in my whole life in terms of my biology, my physiology, my career, my life, everything changed when I went through that menopause transition. So for me, I guess it comes down to semantics maybe. But in this video, I just wanted to talk about how that menopause transition really did shape my life going forward, how it has had such an incredibly significant impact on who I am as a person and the trajectory of my life. So hi, if you're new here, welcome. If you're not new here, welcome back. I'm Bev. I'm a coach and a trainer, and I specifically help coaches and wellbeing practitioners to tap into the corporate market, because that's what I've done. And actually that's one of the reasons why menopause has been such a big transition for me. Let me tell you my story, if you like, how menopause absolutely flipped the switch on the direction that my life took. So I'm 58 now, and I would say my menopause transition probably started in my early to mid 40s, although I have to tell you I had no idea that that's what it was. I started to see changes in my physiology. I saw changes in my menstrual cycle. I started to see changes in my energy levels. I certainly started to see some changes in my mental health. I'd certainly not related them to menopause. I hadn't even come across the term perimenopause, so it wasn't something that I was familiar with. But by the time I reached 50, I think reality was dawning on me that, you know, I was no spring chicken anymore and that things were changing. And on my 50th birthday, I had my very first hot flush. And actually I had my very first and one of very few hot flushes. Hot flushes were not a symptom that really showed up for me. But I look back now and I can see how things had really started to change in the few years around that age 52 piece, or that age 50 piece, when I had my first hot flush. I'd moved jobs. I'd worked for the civil service in the UK for a very long time. I'd worked predominantly for the Royal Air Force, and I'd had various jobs in that time. And a couple of years before I left my job with the MOD, which I'm going to talk about with the Royal Air Force, I'm going to talk about that in a second, I'd been in a job that I'd really loved. It had been the role that I'd wanted for many, many years. I'd actually applied for this post 3 times before I got it, and it was a role that I was eminently suited to. And I'd done the role for nearly 6 years, but there was something had shifted in me. I was impatient. I was feeling, I don't know, just a bit overly stressed about the whole job. And I didn't really understand why, because I knew the job inside out. But I was starting to, I don't know, lose concentration almost. I was forgetting appointments, and I was really just struggling in the job. And I don't think anybody really knew that I was struggling. I think I probably hid it quite well. But I you know, sort of underneath the surface, behind closed doors, if you like, I was feeling very stressed and overwhelmed by the job. And my default was to run away, and I applied for another job, still within the MOD, still working for the Royal Air Force, but actually in a job that I was eminently less suited for. There was a lot of IT, managing our internal intranet site, which I had no experience of. There was a huge learning curve there. I was in an environment that I was unfamiliar with. And although I really enjoyed working with the people, I found that I was really struggling to learn this new job. Now, when I look back in the past, I'd been in jobs that that weren't a great fit. They didn't really potentially fit my skill set particularly well. And there were certainly jobs in the past where I'd had a bit of a steep learning curve, but I'd always found a way to just had lost the capacity to learn, and it was leaving me feeling incompetent. I was trying to do my level best to hide it from the people that I worked with my team. I managed a small team. I was trying to hide it from my boss who had been so supportive. We'd had this really great interview for the job, and I know he had high expectations from me, and I felt like I was letting him down. I felt like I was letting my team down. I felt like I was letting myself down, and this whole sort of stress was building. It took quite some time before I realised that it was all to do with changing hormones and my menopause and all of that sort of thing. But how it showed up, there was some real challenges when I think back, especially with brain fog and my sort of cognitive function, which I had no idea was anything to do with menopause. I honestly thought menopause was just about your period stopping and hot flushes and getting a bit grumpy and crying a lot, which I was doing lots of as well, to be fair. But I hadn't realised it affected your confidence, your competence, that it affected your decision making, your ability to remember stuff. I hadn't realised that it would impact my self-esteem in the way it did. Notwithstanding all the physical changes that I was going through, the cognitive changes really were taking their toll. I can remember on one occasion having a really bad migraine at work. I occasionally used to get migraines where my vision would go a little bit weird. I'd get this sort of pixelated vision, and generally I think it's what they call a migraine aura, and it would be like, I always liken it to the film, what's the name of the film? Not Terminator. The one where it's like a shimmering ghost. No, it's gone. Cannot remember the name. But I get this kind of zigzaggy, pixelated image in my eye, and I can't focus on anything. It's like it moves in the centre of my vision. And normally they pass within about 20 minutes. And I had this episode at work, and it was worse than I'd ever had. And I remember sitting in the canteen, the tea bar, where we used to all meet in the kitchen, if you like, for lunch break and tea breaks. And I sat at the table, and a colleague asked me what I had for lunch, and I looked down at my lunch, and I could not for the life of me remember the word for rice, which was in my lunch box. I'd made a rice salad. I couldn't remember the word for peppers. I couldn't remember very, very simple words. I couldn't remember the name of the lady that I worked with. We worked really closely together, and I could not recall her name, despite the fact that I'd been speaking to her not 10 minutes earlier. It was terrifying. And I remember giving my husband a call. He also worked at the same Air Force station that I did, and trying to explain to him that I had this really weird episode of this migraine aura, and this time it had been so much worse. And he immediately came and got me, made an appointment, took me to my GP. They did some tests and sent me the next day to the stroke clinic at our local hospital, which was terrifying. And I had to go and have an MRI scan. They did an ultrasound scan of my carotid artery to see if there was a blockage. That I had to go back and have a CT scan. I lost my driving license for 6 weeks while they were doing tests. It was terrifying, the thought that I might have had a mild stroke, or I think they call them a TIA. And yet, when I was having all of these tests, the consultants were telling me there's nothing to see. We can't see any reason for why you've had this episode. Your brain scans are all fine, you know, physically I was in good shape. I'd been doing a lot of physical exercise, and you know, they were saying everything is in great shape, so we don't understand why you're having these events. And I had to go back and see the consultant a week or two after my CAT scan results came back. My MRI scan results, I beg your pardon, came back. And they told me that it was hormonal, that it was because I was perimenopausal. And I had no idea that perimenopause could cause something as severe or significant as what looked to be a minor stroke. Happily, that's all it was. It was hormonal changes, and I still get the migraines with aura now and again. In fact, I had one earlier today, but it passed in just 20 minutes or so, and that was the worst episode I'd have ever had. But you can imagine it was very, very scary. And I remember on another occasion being asked to order some equipment for work. It was some racking for our workshop that bolted to the wall, and it was about £5,000 to buy this equipment. And I had a budget, and I had a credit card, a company credit card that I was able to use, and I actually raised an order, a purchase order, and took it across to our purchasing clerk and asked her to order this racking. And on my way back to my office, I saw my boss, and we had a little chat in the corridor. And I said, "Oh, I've just been and ordered the racking." And he looked at me with such confusion, because the racking had been delivered a few days earlier. It had been installed into the workshop. It had been safety checked, and I had no recollection of how it. Well, I just couldn't figure out how it could be there. And I went back to my office very, very confused, and did a little bit of sort of researching through my past files and my internet history, and realised that I'd ordered the racking about 2 weeks earlier, and I'd paid for it online with my company credit card. It had been delivered, and all of the paperwork that I needed to do, all the administration of that purchase, was where it should be. I'd done it all, and I had no recollection of it. I cannot tell you how scary that was, to realise that this big chunk of my memory was missing. And to this day, I cannot remember placing the order. I had to very quickly go back and speak to the purchase clerk and say, "Please don't order that, I've already got it in place." Just bizarre. I didn't even need her to place the order. I had the ability to do that myself. It was all very strange. Perimenopause was starting to change my life. It shaped my life so much, and the idea that I was going through some significant physical, cognitive, emotional changes. After about 2 years of really kind of struggling in the background with all of this going on, and trying really, really hard to hide what I was going through, and to not show that I felt like I was failing, although there were definitely times when I ended up in my boss's office in tears, because I felt like I was letting him down, and he was asking me to do things, and I was struggling to learn how to do them. And to his credit, he said, I think you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself. We don't expect you to know this straight away. Of course, you're going to take time to learn. But in my mind, I was failing so much. Anyway, in the end, I quit my job. My plan had always kind of been to stay with the civil service. It was a nice, secure job. But I made the decision to quit my job at the age of 52 and start working for myself. And the reason I think perimenopause and that menopausal transition was so pivotal to my life is because I've done more in the last 6 years, I think, that has taken me out of my comfort zone, but created opportunities that I would never, ever, ever have been able to experience if I'd stayed in my job. So as much as it was a challenge going through that transition, I actually now think it was the best thing that ever happened to me. I started a business without a clue what I was doing. I've talked about this in quite a lot of different videos. I'll perhaps put a few up for you to go and have a look at after this. But you know, I started a business as a coach, very quickly began working with corporate businesses talking about menopause. This topic, this subject that had been such a major part of my life, this sort of upheaval in my life, had become the basis for a new career and a new business. And I think the reason why my business took off and grew quite quickly was because that subject was such a real part of my story. It had such a profound impact on my life. And although I was happy, you know, now that I look back, to have made that change, I didn't want other women to feel like they had to endure this transition in a state of confusion and shame and feeling like they had to mask what they were going through for fear of being judged and all of the other stuff that we know can happen when you've got when we go through that kind of aging process, and then pretty much anything to do with female health. So I didn't want other women to go through this, and I think because I was so willing to talk openly by this point about what I'd gone through, I don't know when I made the decision that I wasn't going to stay quiet about it. I can't remember that moment when I switched from feeling like I had to mask everything to feeling like, actually, I need to talk about this. I need other people to understand that there are some real challenges that we go through in that transition. But I also, as time went on, I think when I first started my business, it was very much about the issues, the challenges that we have. And as time went on, especially probably a year to 18 months into my business, I started to realize that, like many challenges that we have in life, we can see them as challenges, or we can see them as opportunities. And I'd made the switch, and I honestly cannot tell you, I didn't have like a sudden aha moment when I thought, this is such a big opportunity. It didn't really happen like that. But I would say from about 18 months onwards, I started to talk more about menopause as an opportunity and seeing it as a positive shift in life. I started to talk about our butterfly years being the sort of the perimenopausal and postmenopausal years of our life, where we are no longer that kind of caterpillar nibbling away at life, trying to just keep our head down and grow a life, grow a career, grow a family. We kind of go through this metamorphosis and come out different but equally valuable. And this was the message I started to try and take into my trainings and take into my coaching, that, you know, this is the start of the next chapter. It's not the end of life as we know it. And, you know, since making the shift in my life because of perimenopause, it was perimenopause that was the catalyst for the change. I've been able to speak on stages. I've been, I've done a TEDx talk. I've written a book. I've worked and partnered with some amazing businesses, amazing companies. I've, been able to get on podcasts and, creating YouTube videos. Who thought I would ever do this? There's so many things that I've learned how to do. And interestingly, bizarrely, the very thing that I felt like I was struggling with, trying to understand the tech and the IT stuff in that final role that I had in the MOD, working for the Royal Air Force, actually is now the thing I love most. I love the fact that I can dive in and try and learn new things, learning how to film videos, learning how to edit videos, learning how to create online training, learning how to do podcasts, learning how to build landing pages, learning how to create sales funnels, learning marketing. Oh gosh, I could just go on and on and on. And it's such an amazing, time in my life. My 50s, I honestly would say my 50s have been a voyage of discovery. It's been amazing to try all of these different things. Do you know, I guess the point of this video was really to reassure anybody who's watching who might be going through their perimenopause, menopause transition, anybody who's in later life, who's feeling like they want to make a change but feeling worried. Important in shaping who I am now, and I wouldn't change it for the world. So there you go. I hope you found this interesting. If you've enjoyed this video, please give me a like. I'm on a mission. I have just short of 400 subscribers. I am on a mission to try and get to the 1,000 subscriber mark in the next couple of months. I want to try and change my content a little bit to do exactly what I've just been talking about now, to not be all about sort of teaching and sharing business tips, although there will still be some of that, but actually to share a little bit more about my own journey and my own story, in the hope that maybe it will inspire you, even if it just inspires one person watching, to feel more confident about getting older, to feel more confident about the changes that we go through this perimenopause transition, to know that this is the start of something brilliant as we step into our later years, into our butterfly years. It's not the end. I will see you soon. Take care.